Well, hi Earthlings. I'm not long back from London Veg Fest, which was really good this year. One of the reasons why I love London Veg Fest is it's kind of like I kind of see it because it's on three levels. I kind of see it as a kind of conference with like restaurants below in a way, which is quite interesting. Vegan restaurants below, because if you just stay on level three, it would just seem very much like a conference because there's five or six meeting rooms, including a big auditorium, and a few stalls and a couple of cafes, but all the actual rest of the stuff is kind of below. Anyway, during one of my talks there, I was talking as ever about the vegan social movement pioneers. The spectre of the vegan strategist came up, Tobias Leonhardt, mainly because I suppose I was citing him as a reducitarian influence on the movement. And a lot of people are still kind of fairly confused about this guy's position. I mean, it is confusing in the sense that his own theory suggests that the last name that he should have ever chosen was the vegan strategist. Like the vegetarian tactician would be more accurate, in the sense that he argues that we have a two-phase model, and that the first phase is pre-vegan, which we're in now, and in that phase we should be very, very careful about the idea of talking about veganism or animal rights or speciesism, that kind of thing. I think his position has kind of changed lately, not least because only about 2-3 years ago, he and his colleague Melanie Joy would argue that veganism is a scare word, which is kind of why Melanie Joy doesn't even use the word vegan in her famous book, and also said it's possible to eat eggs and dairy without violence, which is a kind of vegetarian concept, but then that's what carnism is. It's a vegetarian concept. So he's always kind of had a less than vegan position, and on the grounds that he thought that veganism, and might still, that vegan is a scare word, and that we're supposed to be in some pre-vegan phase. It doesn't really make any sense to be called the vegan strategist, and he'd always kind of really wanted to redefine veganism to mean vegetarian, or even worse in a sense, in the sense that he thinks that veganism should allow for some exceptions, and those might include the eating of other animals. And he's also careful to kind of suggest that he's putting that out as a set of questions, but nevertheless, what's the use of a set of questions when the only answer is yes, well, we should redefine veganism to mean vegetarian. His latest non-vegan thing is to, once again, rather than reduce veganism to vegetarian, the scheme now seems to be to reduce animal rights, or vegan animal rights, or something like that, to high welfare animal welfare, which is kind of weird kind of thing. He gave a talk at Luxembourg early this year. Now, why this person is invited on an annual basis to talk at an animal rights conference in Luxembourg defeats me, but he is, and he did, and he basically said that we can have what he calls a symbiotic relationship. He kind of like said it as though he's just invented the idea of symbiosis. We can have a symbiotic relationship between us and other animals. For example, hens could give us some eggs, and in this symbiotic relationship, we would provide them with some things like shelter and some food. And it seems to me now that this is just another strand to this reducitarian thing that's going on in the movement. It's bad enough with the activists trying to reduce it to other animals only. Leonhardt always said that veganism was a diet, or that the movement was about food, which obviously isn't true. And now, as you'll see in this clip, we're talking about high welfare animal welfarism, nothing more. There's already a name for it. So the vegetarian tactician is now also an animal welfarist. Go figure.
Um, and I started to think that given that situation in the wild is also not so wonderful all the time, that maybe a situation where animals and humans can live together and help each other might be one of the best ways for animals to live on this planet, right? So if you look at what we can offer to animals, that is food and shelter and protection from predators and even medical care. That's all things that they don't get in the wild. And we could have animals around in a situation where they almost feel entirely free. They don't necessarily, I mean, we don't want to confine them, but we can imagine situations where they're almost, it feels as if they are free. And on the other hand, I mean, I think if we give this, if we offer this to animals, but they don't offer us anything in return, then there will be very few animals around because it's not a give and take. You know, there would be only some sanctuaries where some very well-meaning people against the flow are putting a lot of money in saving a couple of animals. I just don't think that might not be the, I think that might not be the ideal situation. I think it might be good to have animals around us, that we continue to live with animals and that we keep being compassionate with them and cultivate that compassion for other species so that we can also learn to have compassion for the animals outside of our culture, the wild animals. And so it might be interesting if while we give these things to them, animals may give some things to us, and there is a give and take. There's some kind of trade, and maybe that could be companionship, but we could imagine sheep doing grazing for us, or maybe even we can have cows that are treated incredibly well, and we now and then take some cells from them, entirely harmless. They are living on sanctuaries or among us, and we take some cells for clean meat, no matter what you think of clean meat. They could give us manure, they could give us wool, maybe in some cases on a very low, small scale, they could give us some eggs. And the point here is that to think that every use is necessarily abuse is, I think, a mistake. I mean, there can be, like I said, a give and take, and that is what I call a symbiosis. Living together, humans and animals, the problem is, of course, they cannot give consent to us. We cannot really know what they want, but maybe we can research that further. Anyway, this is something to think about further. I haven't reached any conclusion about that.